Hey, this is Tommy Smith. We're here tonight with our Big 12 report. Review of Week 4. Looking forward to Week 5. With me, as always, is Matthew Postons. Matthew, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good. I honestly forgot we were doing this today, and I wore the worst possible shirt for video. It looks, first of all, like a picnic blanket, and second of all, I was told never wear checks on TV, so if it bleeds, my apologies.
I was thinking howdy doody, but
thank you.
well, Matthew, thanks for coming.
What's worse is I'm old enough to get that reference.
Yeah. Thanks for coming, and then, as always, thanks for joining us. We'll look back real quick at Week 4 in the Big 12. It was kind of a slow week. We only had 4 games, but there was a very big one played down in Waco between the Baylor Bears and the Oklahoma State Cowboys.
Yeah, and I felt like Baylor made kind of a statement that they're going to be in this, I think, to the end. Their defense was especially impressive to me. I know they give up a lot of yards and they gave up 28 points, but I thought they tackled maybe the best I've seen them tackle in a few years under Phil Bennett as their defensive coordinator. So, Oklahoma State's still in this. One loss doesn't necessarily kill your chances of winning the Big 12, but I think Baylor made a statement that they're talented enough and they're mentally tough enough to be in this. And they got 2 relatively easy games coming up in Iowa State and Kansas to kind of set the table for the rest of their Big 12 season.
Yeah, they're going to run into a gauntlet after those 2 games against Iowa State and Kansas that you mentioned when they get Texas, TCU, and Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Those 3 games in a row. So until then, Baylor will probably be atop the conference. A game played Friday night here in Dallas. TCU and SMU in the battle for the Iron Skillet. Very sluggish first half. Very sluggish first half, but TCU picked it up after halftime. And they ran away with the game 33-3. Your thoughts on TCU SMU?
Well, Gary Patterson was pretty happy after the game. He called it their most complete game, I think. Certainly their most complete half of defense in the second half, the way they just completely shut SMU down.
Yeah.
I think they found some guys that can help them from a playmaking standpoint with the loss of Kevontae Turpin.
Right.
And I can tell you, after walking around the sidelines that Friday, Kevontae Turpin sitting in a jersey with a big brace around his left leg and crutches. He's not coming back anytime soon. No,
they found John Yars had a big game. Desmond White has been named co-special teams player of the week in the Big 12. Devontae Gray is helping him return kicks.
Yeah.
But talk about the game that Yars had. He opened up the third quarter, and with TCU coming back and running away with it the way they did with a 75-yard catch and run from Kenny Hill. And Patterson made reference to him having a big game and stepping up in Turpin's absence.
Well, they needed somebody to do so. I mean, they had Taj Williams, he had a good game, but they really needed a second guy to kind of step into that void that Turpin left. And at least for one game, John Yars did that. If he could become that vertical threat down the field, or if he can just become a possession guy, depending on the role they envision for him moving forward, that certainly helps them from an offensive standpoint. They're going to need it against Oklahoma on Saturday. That game looks like it's going to be a big fireworks game of the Week 5 schedule.
Certainly. Other action over the weekend, Iowa State, Matt Campbell picks up his first win as the Cyclones head coach against San Jose State.
They really needed a win. I mean, they really needed some confidence, and I think that game gives it to them. They still haven't settled their quarterback situation. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, but at least for one game, they've got a little momentum and they feel good about themselves.
And then they get Baylor this weekend.
They get Baylor, and they may not feel good about themselves for very long.
Something we talked about last week was the West Virginia Mountaineers, and could they be a sleeper for the Big 12 Conference title? And they certainly lived up to that, beating BYU on Saturday. Yeah,
Dana Holgorsen went into that game saying this is kind of a litmus test game for us. We're playing a team with a national reputation. BYU may not be as good as some other teams in the Big 12, but they do have a national following. They traveled well to that game in Landover, Maryland. And the one thing that Dana Holgorsen isn't too thrilled about was they gave up a big lead in that game. But overall, he was pretty impressed with how they played. They ran the football well. Skylar Howard's doing a very good job of limiting turnovers and limiting mistakes in the passing game, and their defense created 4 turnovers against BYU, and that's huge in the Big 12 when you consider how much they throw the football in this conference. Being able to create turnovers, especially interceptions, is a big deal.
And lastly, Kansas State played half a game, but picked up a win over Missouri State. as that game was delayed or basically postponed at halftime, canceled at halftime due to inclement weather. Bill Snyder said he would have liked to go on and play, but what did you make of Kansas State in that ball game?
Well, I think every coach would love to play a full game, but with lightning in the area, they probably made the right call. They won the game 35-0. I'm not sure how much you learn from a game like that. We really weren't going to learn a lot to begin with because Missouri State, being an FCS school, their starting quarterback was suspended for the game, so they had to play their backup. I'm not sure how much we really learned, except that Winston Dimel, their fullback, is one heck of a weapon. I think 6 touchdowns now in 2 games.
Well, let's look ahead to this Saturday. The late game on the schedule in the Big 12 is the big one, and that is the Oklahoma Sooners coming off of a bye. We'll head to Fort Worth to take on TCU. TCU sits at 3-1, 1-0 in conference play. What do you make of the Sooners and the Horned Frogs Saturday?
Well, you listen to Bob Stoops during the call of the media on Monday, and the thing that really came out of it for him was, I got the impression he kind of wanted to just get this offense back to basics on Saturday. The thing that's been killing them against Houston and Ohio State's been turnovers. They've made too many mistakes with the football. Baker Mayfield has made a few of them. I think what they want to do is they want to get back to basics. They want to get back to running the football, featuring Sanaje Perine, featuring Joe Mixon, because when they run the football, their offense really hums, and that opens up so many more things for Baker Mayfield. But more than anything else, they have to protect the football against TCU. They've got enough playmakers on defense to where they can make a team pay with an interception or a forced fumble here or there. I think they forced 2 turnovers against SMU on Friday. They've been focusing on the turnover game during the bye week. They know they have to fix it. Bob Stoops said, we feel like we put in the time. Now we have to see if our guys are actually ready to turn that piece around.
Hey, he mentioned in that call that Baker Mayfield put a lot of this on his shoulders, and it's going to be big to see how he comes out of those 2 losses against TCU and facing that TCU defense, which is nothing to laugh at. On the TCU side, we talked about Desmond White. We talked about Deontay Gray helping to pick up some of the slack for the loss of Kavontae Turpin. Let's talk about Kyle Hicks.
Yeah, let's talk about Kyle Hicks for a minute, because I was really impressed with what I saw up close against SMU. He's a very tough runner inside the tackles. You get outside, he takes a good hit, he can get up the field. He's not really scared at all of what's coming at him. I saw a couple of big hits coming at him, coming up the sideline. One hit he got from an SMU player where he knew it was coming and he took the punishment anyway. TCU's been kind of a running back by committee kind of team for the last year and a half. They've been running a lot of different guys through there. Hicks is a guy that I think can solidify that run game for them. He's got 2 straight 100-yard rushing games now. I feel like they're going to start featuring him more and more in the offense, especially as teams start to key on Kenny Hill more and more, who had a huge passing game against SMU. That might have been the quietest 540 yards passing I've ever seen in my life. By the end of the game, I was absolutely stunned that he had that many passing yards.
He had 150 at halftime.
Yeah, he had 150 at halftime. So, to me, as Kenny Hill gets featured more in the offense and teams want to focus more on him, you're going to see problems with that, and they're going to have to turn to a guy like Kyle Hicks to get the ball up the field, to take the heat off of Kenny Hill and make it a more balanced offense.
Moving along, you got a prediction for that game, by the way?
I know TCU's at home, but I tend to think Oklahoma's going to win. If this were a game where TCU had 2 weeks going in to prepare for it, like Oklahoma does, I'd probably take TCU. But Oklahoma having 2 weeks to prepare and TCU coming off that game against SMU, I just kind of feel like Oklahoma's going to have a game plan that's going to account for just about everything TCU can do. The one thing is, Oklahoma's secondary has not played well the first 3 weeks of the season. Secondary has to get better. If they don't, Kenny Hill can take advantage of them up the field, but I'm still thinking OU will win that game.
I tend to agree with you there. Let's move along. Another big game, early start up in Stillwater. The Texas Longhorns, coming off a bye themselves, will face Oklahoma State after the loss at Baylor. Charlie Strong, has talked a lot about his defense, and Van Malone making some changes possibly. Not at coaching, but just with personnel and what they're doing, schemes. In their off week. What do you see with Horns coming off a bye, playing Oklahoma State up in Stillwater?
Well, he's very vague about what he means by changes to the scheme. The way he put it was, we want to put guys in the right places so they can be successful. What that means to Charlie Strong could be anything. I think the big news to come out of this is that he hasn't made any changes in the coaching staff in terms of how things are organized. Vance Redford's still going to be the defensive coordinator. Vance has been with Charlie for a long time, going back to their days at Florida. So they've got a long-time relationship. I don't think Charlie wants to turn his back on his defensive coordinator at this particular point. So they're hoping the tweaks they've made to the scheme, whatever those tweaks may be, are going to help them play better defense. Mike Gundy was very complimentary of the speed they have on the edge, at defensive end, outside linebacker, secondary. So he knows that Texas is going to be coming with a lot of speed from a defensive standpoint on Saturday. And a lot of that means locking down on James Washington, much the way Baylor did on Saturday. I mean, James Washington had a good game, but certainly didn't have the impact on the game that he's had in previous weeks.
No, I find something else that Mike Gundy said during the media call was about the Texas offense, and they're running the Baylor offense pretty much now. They got a preview of it this week, facing Baylor. He talked about them running the football and then setting up, then we're going to throw it over your heads. So what do you think that Oklahoma State takes away from playing Baylor when they face Texas on Saturday?
Well, I think certainly playing a scheme like that in consecutive weeks helps them from a game planning standpoint, but the backs that they're going to face against Texas are completely different than the backs they faced against Baylor. You're talking about Deontay Foreman, you're talking about Mike Warren III. These are two big bruising backs who like to get up the field, are happy to run between the tackles and absorb contact, completely different than the types of backs that Baylor has. I think that's going to be a very interesting mix for Oklahoma State's defense to deal with. They did a pretty solid job of handling Baylor's running game, but the bigger backs for Texas, I think, pose a bigger issue to them.
And it will be interesting to watch Shane Buechele's progress. Another week, getting first rep snaps, and another week as a starting quarterback in Texas. He's just done remarkable things. Moving along, Kansas and Texas Tech get things started on Thursday night in the Big 12. Not much really to say. This should be a Texas Tech win. Maybe David Beatty and the Kansas Jayhawks are excited about the opportunity to score some points.
I think they're excited about the opportunity to play on Thursday night. I mean, he talked about it being a recruiting showcase for his program. I'm not entirely sure how he's going to feel about that after this one's over, because Texas Tech has been scoring points in boatloads. Their problem, of course, has been stopping opponents. I don't think they're going to have a huge problem stopping Kansas because they just don't have the offensive weapons yet. They still haven't quite settled on a starting quarterback. They're still toggling between Montel Cozart and their other quarterback, Ryan Willis. They've got a solid running game behind Keon Kinner, but defensively, Kansas doesn't have the depth yet to hang with a team like Texas Tech. When you consider that Patrick Mahomes should be getting more national attention for the kind of numbers he's putting up, I don't really think Kansas can keep up with him in that game. I think this is actually a big game for Patrick Mahomes. Not so much in the way that he puts up numbers. I think he's going to put up good numbers in this game, but this is an opportunity for him to showcase himself nationally.
That's right.
There's only going to be a couple of games on Thursday night. This is a guy who should be getting more love in the Heisman race, in my opinion, right now. I think he should be in the top 5. I think voters who watch this game are going to get a really good eyeful at what Patrick Mahomes can be.
Right.
We were talking during the call about how, because of Patrick Mahomes, Texas Tech has more of a misdirection game in its offense. And Cliff Kingsbury said, he's a misdirection unto himself. And what he means is this guy can throw, he can run, he can do a lot of different things out of the pocket, and he's really difficult to defend. If Lamar Jackson weren't having the kind of year he's having this year, Patrick Mahomes might be the quarterback we're talking about in terms of being the front runner for the Heisman.
I agree with you on that point as well. Let's move forward. Last game on the schedule is 2:30 kick. West Virginia will host Kansas State. We talked about the Mountaineers and their opportunity. They're 3-0. They're right there with Baylor at the top of the conference. Can the Mountaineers continue things against the Wildcats?
I think they can. I think the defense is the big piece of this. We talked about how they forced 4 turnovers against BYU last weekend. They've got a sustained pass rush. They have more experience on this defense than you think they do because they've been building up depth. the last few years in the Big 12. And now that their offense is fairly balanced with Skylar Howard at quarterback, Shelton Gibson at wide receiver, and Rochelle Shell and the other running backs in that offense, they're going to be a really hard team to deal with in Big 12 action, frankly. And Kansas State, as well coached as Bill Snyder teams usually are, they just don't have the talent offensively to keep up with West Virginia. I mean, Jesse Ertz is a nice quarterback. Winston Dimble's a good fullback who's become a very nice short yardage weapon for them. But they really don't have anybody that I think can stretch the field offensively for them. And defensively, given the amount of plays that West Virginia wants to run in that offense, I think ultimately they're going to wear that Kansas State defense down.
That'll be a good game to watch at 2:30 on Saturday.
Yeah.
I spoke a little too soon. The game the game we left out, we spoke about a little bit. Baylor is going to get another slightly easier opponent against Iowa State this week, and Iowa State coming off a win is running into a buzzsaw. At home it'll be in Ames, but what are the chances for the Cyclones to shut down that Baylor offense?
I don't think they have much of a chance at all, frankly. I mean, they're kind of in the same boat as Kansas right now, in that they don't have a lot of depth in their program because their program hasn't been very good the last few years. They're like Kansas in that they're also trying to figure out what they're going to do at quarterback, because they're rotating Joel Lanning and Jacob Park in that offense right now. And as they say, if you have two quarterbacks, you don't have any. They did a nice job of rotating those guys well in against San Jose State, but Baylor's a much different animal. We know what Baylor's going to want to do. They're going to want to run a lot of plays, play at pace, run the football, set up Seth Russell to throw the ball down the field. And now that you have Ishmael Zamora back after the 3-game suspension, you now have another weapon to throw into that pass offense. We didn't talk about K.D. Cannon leaving that game against Oklahoma State. Have not heard what his condition is in terms of whether or not he'll be available on Saturday. But the way Ishmael Zamora played, he certainly can soften the blow if K.D. Cannon has to miss some time.
Yeah, Ishmael Zamora coming off suspension had a tremendous game coming back. As far as Iowa State goes, Oklahoma State ran the ball extremely well against the Baylor defense, and you talk about Mike Warren. That might be Iowa State's best shot is just feeding the ball to Mike Warren.
It might be. They didn't start out the season running the football very well. They didn't run the ball well against Northern Iowa or Iowa. They've kind of started gathering some steam. Mike Warren's had a couple 100-yard rushing games. This is a guy who's very talented. He was the freshman of the year last year in the Big 12. If they can get him going, that is going to help keep the Baylor offense off the field, which is probably their best defense at this point. And it's going to open up things in the passing game for whoever is behind center to try and get the ball to the receiving corps. Okay.
Real quick before we go, we got your pick of Oklahoma in the TCU game. I think we know who we're taking with Baylor and Iowa State. Kansas State, West Virginia, or leading West Virginia.
Yeah.
Okay, and then Texas, Oklahoma State. Where are you standing?
Well, that's a tough one because I'd like to say Texas will be well prepared going into a game off a bye, but Oklahoma State's a little desperate right now with the loss to Baylor. You don't want to get behind the 8 ball with 2 Big 12 losses at this point in time. As competitive and as balanced as this conference is this year, I think Oklahoma State's going to win.
Well, Matthew, we appreciate it. As always, anything that we left out you want to touch on?
Just one thing. We talked a little bit about that Texas-Oklahoma State game. We talked about how Texas could run the football very well against Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State found a little rhythm in their running game last week with Justice Hill. Fumbled twice, still had a good game. Mike Gundy talked about him during the call and said, we've got some trust in him because this is a guy that can really break a game for you. He has the ability to get upfield and break huge gains for you, but he said if he fumbles again, they may have to sit him. So he's on a leash right now. As good as he is and as talented as he is, the Cowboys are watching him to make sure he doesn't fumble again.
That was a game changer at the 4-yard line when they were down 28-24 and he fumbled. Well, anything else, Matthew, before we go?
I think that's it.
Okay. We'll be back next week to wrap up Week 5, look ahead to Week 6. My name is Tommy Smith with Rattle and Hum Sports, rnhsports.com. You can check out all of our Big 12 coverage there, as well as our SEC football coverage, Cowboys coverage, Texas Rangers coverage, some music, and health and fitness as well. We look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.